Real-time data is increasingly important for business decision-making. As we move from strategic intelligence to operational intelligence, the timeliness of the data is very important. One of the principles that I think about is that there's really no business surprise. There's no business surprises because there's always some hint that if you're listening to the data, and if you're processing that data and getting insights from the data, you should never be surprised because the data tells you things before they happen. But then the timeliness of data makes a lot of difference because if you're looking at the data too late, then the thing has already happened and you can't do anything about it, so not so interesting. So in the industry, we talk a lot about real time. But what do we really mean by real time? As an engineer, when you say real time to me, I want to start measuring nanoseconds or microseconds because real time is, flight control systems and things like that. That's not usually what we mean in operational decision making, depending on the business domain that you're working in. I prefer the term right time. Right time is not defined by technology, but rather by business processes. How soon do I need the data in order to make a good decision in alignment with my business process? Doing real time just because we can do real time is not a good use of resources. Right time is spending the right amount of money to deliver the data at the right time for the decision when you need it. So we talk a lot about real-time enterprises and moving the data through the enterprise as quickly as the business processes can consume the data. Sometimes referred to this as straight-through processing. Batch processing is really not a great idea anymore because with batch processing, we have to wait too long. And we can't do batch processing and have things like, real-time billing and real-time fraud detection and so on. We need to have the data as quickly as possible in alignment with business processes in order to get the right data at the right time to drive our decisions. So in the old days when we were mostly doing back office reporting, sales reporting and inventory analysis and cash flow analysis, to make a strategic decision, you don't need to know the last 2 hours of transactions. If your strategy depends on the last 2 hours of data, you got a big problem. Strategy is the big picture and looking far ahead and using historical data to understand trends, but it's not about what happened in the last 2 minutes or even 2 hours. But as we move towards operational intelligence, operational decision making, we need the data much more quickly. We need events as they happen to be exposed to give us hints on what's going to happen soon and allow us to prescribe actions to create better outcomes for our business. So if you look at a sophisticated organization, they are not waiting for the end of the month to close their books. They're closing their books every single day. Now, I wouldn't really call this real time, but moving from a monthly close to a daily close is an order of magnitude more fresh data. And now at the end of the month, they're not scrambling around to try and describe to the CEO what happened and so on. Every day they get the key performance indicators. Every day they're closing the books. Is that real time? Not really, but it's right time. And right time is really where the best investments are made. The right way to think about this is what is actionable? So imagine that on Tuesday morning, you get a report of everything that happened on Monday. And you look at that and say, oh, well, I had, too much fraud and my customers were defecting and whatever those things are. Getting that report on Tuesday allows you to see what happened on Monday, but the action's already happened and it's too late probably to do anything about it, except from a strategic point of view, maybe changing processes and so on. But imagine, instead of waiting till Tuesday to report, on Monday, you knew that you were out of stock. Maybe you could restock the shelf on the same day, in the same hour, if you have direct store delivery. Maybe if you saw that a mortgage for a very important customer was delayed, you could intervene and unstick that mortgage and get it processed in the same day. Imagine what you would do with the data if you had it one day sooner. And then you can start talking about, well, instead of having batch overnight processing, I'm going to have intraday processing multiple times per day. Now, should you have it every hour, every 8 hours, every minute, every second? That depends on your business process. What are you going to do with the data? If you're a telecommunications company and your network is congested, I want to see that data, very, very quickly so I can uncongest the network, so I can reroute packets, I can reconfigure and get better outcomes for my subscribers. If you're in cybersecurity, detecting that someone's phishing on one of the account by analyzing the interactions with the account online, you have seconds in order to prevent that account from being emptying to the fraudster. So it really depends on the business process. And I like to talk about this concept of action time or action distance. What is the time between when an event occurs and when you make informed decision to take an action based on that event? And it is almost always the case that there is a downward slope in value that takes place. The more you wait to take the action, the less impact that you can have. So imagine a large deposit into a bank account. If I see that large deposit, I want to make sure that I retain those assets in my bank. That means I need to make an offer to you, the customer, of how to best invest those assets, because if I don't make good offers for how to invest those assets, you're going to take those assets and you're going to move them somewhere else. So in the past, I worked with a bank that had these software event detectives looking for the data associated with large deposits. Now, it's actually tricky. What is a large deposit? Because a large deposit for one person may be different than a large deposit for another. So there's a lot of analytics that go into, large relative to the person making the deposit. Because that might be the normal deposit for me every week, but for somebody else, that's a very large deposit. So it's very individual. So we have this software event detective. We look for the large deposits. And then based on a large deposit, we want to retain those assets. We want to make an offer to that individual. If you wait till the next day to make that offer, you will not retain those assets with the same probability as if you made the offer in the same day. So there's actually an exponential decline in probability of retaining the assets depending on how fast you get to the customer. Within 2 hours makes a huge difference, because the personal banker will then, make contact with the customer. This only makes sense for large assets, of course. Makes contact with the customer, makes an offer. Here's how we would suggest that you invest these assets. We're watching out for you. I'm your personal banker. You have to be careful about the creep factor of, wait a minute, how do you know that deposit just happened? Well, I'm your personal banker. It's my job to know that. And you make the right offer. Now, for other individuals, maybe they get an email, or maybe they get some other channel, depending on the value of the assets that have been deposited. That large transaction, again, large is relative. The longer you wait, the less likely you are to retain the assets. If you wait one day, your probability of retention of those assets goes down by 50%. If you wait another day, another 50%. By the end of the week, don't even bother anymore. So the timeliness makes a big difference. So we want to get the data to the decision maker as quickly as possible. And again, decision maker might be a human, but also might be a piece of software that is doing the scoring and automating the recommendation to the customer and the person managing the leads or whatever the business process is. So there's really, at the highest level, 2 steps. First is today's data today. Don't wait for tomorrow to look at today's data. That means we need to do, I won't call it real time, but let's say near real time data loading, or maybe micro batches or frequent mini batches. Get the data into the foundation data products as quickly as it makes sense relative to the business processes that are going to use them. Don't spend a lot of money on real time if hourly is good enough. But on the other hand, if there's more value in getting the data minute by minute basis, then we need to look at that investment relative to the value created. Industry research will tell you that more than 90% of all data in a modern data warehouse will be updated multiple times per day. And more than 50% will be updated at least once per hour. Now, that does not mean that all data in the data warehouse gets updated in real time or multiple times per hour, but the data is particularly related to customer interactions or critical operations, like the operation of a machine that's critical to your manufacturing line. These things get done much more quickly. So we're moving to a world where it's no longer about batch file processing, but continuous real-time stream processing, acquiring data on a continuous change data capture basis from the source systems, maybe going through some reliable queuing system like Kafka or other model, and then doing the integration and doing the value add in real time, in streaming with continuous flow management of that data. So this is the first part. Get today's data today. The second part is, what are you going to do with that data? We can say, we're going to create a dashboard. And in the dashboard, the data can be moving up and down, and you can look at that. These dashboards make very sexy boardroom demos, but I'm not convinced of their real value. Whose job is it? What human wants to sit in front of that dashboard and look at these, bar charts go up and down? No. You want software to do this. You want software-managed exception alerts. So you might have thousands of events per second, tens of thousands of events per second. Software can keep up with that. So these events are coming through, and then you can have a business rules engine or increasingly machine learning models understanding as these events come through, which ones are just normal standard operating business execution, in which case no action to take, which ones are the outliers where we need to pay attention, the exceptions where we want to take an action to prevent fraud or make sure the machine's not going to break down. So we create alerts to a person or a piece of software that then takes action on that. So we're going to, on a continuous near real-time basis, be consuming that data, looking for the exceptions, looking for the outliers, looking for where we have opportunity to take action. This can very often involve complex event processing and having a rules engine that the business can own the rules is very important, because we want the business to own the speed of change. Now, of course, you had simulation environments so you can test those changes that you're making before you put them in full production, but the business owns the rate of business change. And we can start with rules engine, and that gives you very deterministic processing, but increasingly we're having rules engines working together with AI machine learning models and scoring engines, and then the rules engine decides what action to take based on the score that you're taking. So the bottom line here is, think about how to get the data to your decision maker faster. And your decision maker might be a human or might be a piece of software. That software might be executing machine learning models. It might be a sophisticated rules engine, but get the data to the decision maker faster. And it's not really about real time, it's about right time. The right time to make decisions aligned to your business processes. And then you will get much higher value from that data because you're executing more quickly.